The baby had been crying from the moment the plane left the runway. It was a thin, aching sound that cut through the usual hum of the cabin. Passengers shifted in their seats and some pressed their heads back with weary patience, but no one said anything. A woman in the first row tried to rock the child against her shoulder, whispering to him with a tremor in her voice. Her hands shook as if she were afraid to hold him too tightly or too loosely. Mark sat 3 rows back with his son, Noah, who had curled up against his side with his headphones on. They were used to travel. Mark had grown comfortable with the awkwardness of being a single father. He had learned long ago that people watched a man alone with a child in a different way. They looked longer. They formed quiet opinions. The woman at the front reminded him of those early months when he was afraid he might break his son just by touching him. When the baby's cries grew sharper, the woman pressed her hand to her forehead. She looked exhausted to the point of breaking. A flight attendant leaned near, tried to help, stepped back with a gentle look when nothing improved. Then the woman whispered something to herself so softly that only Mark seemed to hear. He had always been cursed with good hearing. I cannot do this. Something inside him moved before he could think. He rose, patted Noah's arm, and walked up the aisle. The woman startled when he stopped beside her, as if she had been caught doing something wrong. She held her breath the way someone does when tears are close. May I try? He asked. For a moment she hesitated. Her eyes were an unusual shade, dark but bright at the center, as if lit from behind by some hidden memory. Then she nodded and handed the child to him with a care that revealed how precious the baby was to her. Mark took the little boy with a calm he did not entirely feel. The baby was red-faced from crying, fists balled in panic. Mark shifted him against his chest, felt the tiny heartbeat thudding like a frantic bird. He rocked gently, letting his steps match the natural sway of the plane. He hummed a soft tune he used to sing for Noah when he was very small. Slowly, impossibly, the baby's cries softened. Then stopped. The quiet unfurled through the cabin like a sigh of relief. Passengers glanced up, grateful and surprised. Mark returned to the woman's row and asked if she wanted him to sit with the child for a while. She nodded again. Her voice, when it finally emerged, trembled. Thank you. I did not expect this to be so hard. He settled into the empty seat beside her. The baby slept on his shoulder as if he had known Mark all his life. Noah looked back, eyebrows raised, amused by his father's new situation. Mark gave him a small smile that said he was fine. Then he focused on the woman. Is he your son? Mark asked softly. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her seat. After a long pause, she said, I promised someone I would bring him home. She spoke slowly, as if testing every word before letting it go. Her name was Liana. She explained that she worked for a family whose lives were far bigger than her own. They lived in a world of guarded doors and whispered meetings. The baby belonged to the head of that family, a man whose name she spoke with a respectful distance. A man whose wealth stretched farther than she could imagine. He is dealing with things I cannot speak about, she said. But he trusts me more than he trusts anyone. The baby has been with me since the morning. The father was supposed to join us on this flight, but something changed at the last minute. He sent me ahead. I do not know why. Mark listened. Her story felt too heavy for someone who looked so fragile. Traveling with a child alone is no small task, he said quietly. I remember those days. She steadied him with a searching calm. You handled him as if you understood what he needed better than I did. Mark shifted, not sure how to respond. After his wife passed, he had spent nights pacing with Noah through rooms that felt too silent once the crying stopped. He had learned that children felt the emotions of the adults holding them. Fear traveled through skin. Comfort did too. The plane continued through a long stretch of clouds. The baby rested peacefully, his small breaths warming Mark's collar. When they landed, passengers stood and stretched, ready to step back into their lives. Liana touched Mark's arm. There was a quiet urgency in her eyes. Would you walk with me to the gate? I feel safer when you are near. He agreed without hesitation. Noah walked on his other side. At the gate, a group of well-dressed men waited. They stood in a formation that seemed too formal for an airport. When they spotted the baby, their shoulders lowered with relief. One of them approached, thanked Liana, then turned to Mark. The man glanced at the sleeping child in his arms and his voice softened. "The father wishes to speak with you." Mark blinked. "Me? Why?" "Because you calmed his son when no one else could." Mark handed the child back to Liana with a gentleness that made her smile. As the men led him toward a quiet corner, Mark felt a nervous stir beneath his ribs. He had acted out of instinct and kindness. He had not expected anything to come of it. But sometimes the simplest moment sets another life in motion. And as he walked toward the unseen billionaire waiting to meet him, he felt the strange certainty that what came next would change far more than the crying of a child on a plane.